She is a steel predator, a submerged colossus. Nearly 8 million kilograms of steel, 115 meters long, capable of carrying a dozen cruise missiles and about 30 high-power torpedoes. What truly lurks beneath the waves? What do America's most dangerous submarines really look like? These steel giants are as long as 30-story skyscrapers laid on their side. Meet the 15th Virginia-class submarine, the USS Colorado. With its impressive 9 meters in length, it can dive to depths exceeding 240 meters and operate at speeds greater than 25 knots, about 46 kilometers h. Armed with weapon systems capable of altering the course of a global conflict. Some are stealth hunters, others carry doomsday firepower. The Virginia-class is acoustically the stealthiest submarine the U.S. Navy has ever produced, and a secret design with a revolutionary blueprint is currently taking shape and could redefine naval warfare forever. Stay with us, because you will want to follow this technological journey. The USS Virginia is more than just a submarine. She is the trailblazer of her class, America's most modern line of fast attack boats. In Navy language, designating something as a class means it is the first in a new family of ships, the fundamental design that all others will follow. Each subsequent vessel in that family shares the same core design, the same hydrodynamic hull shape, the same type of nuclear reactor, and the basic systems. However, later models incorporate constant upgrades, smarter electronics, expanded weapons bays, and more optimized internal layout. She is an elongated steel predator, measuring 114.9 meters from bow to stern, with 10.4 meters wide at her thickest point. Submerged, she displaces nearly 7,800 metric tons of water. Imagine flipping a mid-rise office building on its side and sending it silently gliding beneath the wave. The Navy only admits she can dive deeper than 240 meters and run faster than 25 knots. Beyond that, they won't reveal a single word, because what enemies cannot measure, they cannot prepare to face. The story of the Virginia-class begins in the 1990s. The Cold War was over, defense budgets were shrinking, and the Navy faced a dilemma. They had just finished designing the Seawolf class, enormous, lethal, and cripplingly expensive. At billions of dollars each, the Navy could only afford 3. What came next had to be smarter, leaner, and still terrifying to America's rival. The answer to this challenge was the Virginia-class. Building one of these predators does not come cheap. The early boats cost around $2.8 billion each. The larger, newer versions, with additional payload sections, now approach $6 billion and can exceed $4 billion per unit. The construction method was as bold as its design. Instead of leaving the entire job to one yard, the Navy split the task. Electric Boat in Groton, Connecticut, and Newport News Shipbuilding in Virginia worked in tandem. Each built sections of the submarine, traded them, and stitched them together. This was not just about cutting costs. It forced the yards to learn from each other, kept both teams skilled, and established a rhythm that eventually allowed 2 submarines per year to roll off the line. This build system, inaugurated with the Virginia, is still the backbone of American submarine production. The Virginia herself took shape quickly. The Navy signed the contract in 1998, laid her keel a year later, and by August 2003, she was sliding into the Atlantic. Linda Johnson Robb, daughter of President Lyndon B. Johnson, served as her sponsor. On October 23, 2004, she was officially commissioned. She also made history as the first American submarine designed entirely on computers. Every cable run, every pipe, every bunk was modeled digitally before steel was ever cut. This digital approach revolutionized maintenance and training. One of its most audacious leaps forward was not about firepower, but about eyesight. Older submarines relied on periscopes, those long steel tubes that punched through the hull and required the control room to be positioned directly underneath. The Virginia discarded that. Instead, she carries photonics masts, telescoping camera stacks with day, night, and infrared sensors. These beam video into the control room, where sailors watch the surface on massive wall-sized displays. It is the difference between peering through a soda straw and standing in front of an IMAX screen. And since the control room no longer had to sit under the periscope, designers moved it down to a wider deck, freeing up space and providing the crew with a smarter, more ergonomic layout. At its core beats the S9G nuclear reactor, built to last its entire 33-year service life without ever needing refueling. Imagine acquiring a vehicle that never needs fuel. This reactor powers turbines that drive a pump jet propulsion system instead of a traditional propeller. The pump jet is smoother, quieter, and much harder to track. For a hunter in the deep, silence is not just an advantage, it is survival. Her bite is as sharp as her silence. The Virginia carries 4 21-inch torpedo tubes loaded with the Mark 48 heavyweight torpedo. These are wire-guided killers, designed to crush submarines and rip the keels out of surface ships. And the real differentiator, the torpedoes are constantly upgraded with new software, making them smarter and deadlier without ever swapping the hardware. But the Virginia was not built just for torpedoes. Flexibility was part of its DNA. As the first of the line, she carried 12 vertical launch tubes in her bow, each ready to fire a Tomahawk cruise missile. Tomahawks are long-range assassins capable of flying over 1,600 kilometers, contouring the terrain, and hitting a single target with surgical precision. On the Virginia, they can be fired in a rapid salvo, delivering a sudden punch without overwhelming the torpedo room. Although later submarines in the class switched to 2 larger payload tubes, each carrying 6 missiles, the Virginia kept her dozen and proved in testing that they worked perfectly. If you found this technology fascinating, consider subscribing to the channel so you don't miss our next analyses on the future of defense. Stealth is her true weapon. Her hull is wrapped in sound-dampening tiles. Every piece of machinery is carefully mounted on floating bases to prevent vibrations from leaking into the water. Everything about her is tuned to vanish into the ocean's background noise. The early boats, like the Virginia, carried a massive spherical sonar array in the bow. Later submarines in the class swapped it for the large aperture bow sonar, a horseshoe-shaped array that was cheaper, easier to maintain, and more accurate in passive listening. This continuous system of upgrades, new hardware every few years, instead of waiting decades for a new design, began with the Virginia. She also plays a role that never appears on recruiting posters. The Virginia is a secret taxi. Her torpedo room can be reconfigured with bunks for a platoon of special operators. She carries a large lockout chamber that allows divers to slip in and out underwater without ever surfacing. And, in recent years, the Navy has tested unmanned undersea vehicles, UUVs, that are launched and recovered directly through her torpedo tubes. If you want a moment that summarizes her capability, it came in 2008. During operational testing, she fired 3 Tomahawks, 2 from her vertical launchers and 1 from a torpedo tube. It was a quiet, almost routine event. But it proved that this new family of submarines could do the 2 hardest things at once: sneak close and strike far. Since then, the Virginia has lived a rhythm of steady deployment, 6 months out, 6 months home, sliding into the European theater, supporting national strategy, and then returning to New London for modest pierside applause. Life aboard is a balancing act. About 130 sailors operate a machine that is, in equal parts, a nuclear reactor, a weapons factory, and a stealth laboratory. Space is always tight, but compared to older boats, the Virginia feels almost spacious. Of course, the Virginia did not emerge from thin air. To see where she came from, you need to look at the most famous predator of the Cold War. The USS Los Angeles was the prowling shadow that kicked off a dynasty. The SSN 688, the lead ship of what became the legendary Los Angeles class, was the first of a family that would dominate the U.S. Navy's fast attack fleet for decades. At 110.3 meters long and 10 meters wide, she was a nuclear-powered predator built to disappear. Fully loaded, she displaced nearly 6,900 tons. Yet, she could glide through the Pacific with unnerving silence. The Navy only admitted she could go faster than 25 knots and dive below 200 meters. But everyone knew those were just the safe numbers given to the public. The truth was always deeper, faster, quieter, and classified. To anyone on the outside, the Los Angeles was a steel myth. Her story began in the early 1970s, with Cold War tension pressing down on every design choice. The contract was signed, her keel laid at Newport News in January 1972, launched in April 1974, and commissioned on November 13, 1976. For its time, the Los Angeles was a staggering investment, about $900 million in the early 70s, which is equivalent to nearly $1.9 billion in today's value, highlighting the priority given to underwater superiority. A few months after entering service, she was already making history. On May 27, 1977, President Jimmy Carter, himself a former submariner, sailed with her alongside Admiral Hyman Rickover, the father of the nuclear navy. Beneath her skin beat the S-6G reactor, a pressurized water plant that turned steam into electricity and propulsion. The exact performance was secret, but it gave her something unmatched at the time: endurance. Nuclear power meant she could stay at sea for months, limited only by food and the stamina of her crew. A diesel submarine always had to worry about refueling. The Los Angeles never had that concern. That freedom to loiter on the far side of the ocean, to sprint when sonar picked up something suspicious, or to vanish when enemies searched, was game-changing. Her armaments were suited to her role. 4 21-inch torpedo tubes gave her the punch of the Mark 48 heavyweight torpedo. Initially, the Los Angeles did not have vertical launch tubes for missile. That came later. But even in her earliest days, she could fire Tomahawk cruise missiles through her tubes, transforming from a submarine hunter to a land attack sniper in a matter of minutes. Later, sister ships in the class, the Flight II and 688I boats, added 12 dedicated vertical launch cells, but the lead ship proved you did not need them to make a difference. If you are enjoying learning the history of these ships, click the like button to help us bring you more content like this. More than her steel and her weapon, it was where she sailed that cemented her importance. After commissioning, the Los Angeles plunged directly into Mediterranean workups, NATO exercises, and a whirlwind of training. In the late 70s and 80s, she was in the thick of Western Pacific, Westpac, deployment, slipping into patrols that remain buried in classified logbook. The rhythm was relentless. Patrol, upkeep in Subic Bay or Guam, a brief port call in Hong Kong, and then back out again. Sailors called her a travel machine, but in truth, she was a ghost factory, producing presence without fanfare. What made the Los Angeles more than a one-off prototype was evolution. She was the first draft of a family that would stretch to 62 ships built over nearly 25 years. The class split into 3 flights. The early boats looked like the Los Angeles herself, with a spherical bow sonar and 4 tubes. The middle batch introduced the vertical launch cells. The final 23, the 688 IPI boats, were quieter, easier to maintain, and had the capability to operate under the Arctic ice. This constant evolution kept the Los Angeles class as the backbone of the Navy's fast attack force for decades. Inside, life aboard the Los Angeles was focused on business. Before the age of photonics masts and massive flat panel displays, crews worked with optical periscopes, analog consoles, and incessant teamwork. The fire control party worked in whispers. Sonar operators strained to pull a single faint sound out of ocean static. Navigators threaded black water with nothing but charts and math. It was cramped, hot, and extremely efficient. And for those who served, it was addictively purposeful. A life where every task mattered, because mistakes could not be undone. Even her name was significant. Submarines used to be named after fish. But the Los Angeles class broke that rule and adopted the names of American cities. Naming submarines after cities made people pay attention. It meant parades, sponsors, and hometown pride, with communities investing in their submarine. Much of what the Los Angeles actually did will never be unsealed. But the breadcrumbs sketch out a career that stretched from Cold War cat-and-mouse games to post-9/11 patrol. She trained crews. She taught the Navy how to wring every ounce of performance from the class. She shifted seamlessly from tracking Soviet submarines to missions focused on land attack, intelligence collection, and supporting special operations. She did it all for over 30 years, a long time to remain sharp in a world that changes quickly. Like every submarine, she carried tradition. In 2007, as the oldest attack boat in the Pacific, she became guardian of Rear Admiral Richard O'Kane's cribbage board. O'Kane, a Medal of Honor hero and skipper of USS Tang, had left that board behind as a good luck charm. The rule was simple. The oldest submarine in service kept it until she retired and then passed it on. The Los Angeles took it to sea and, when her time came, handed it to USS Bremerton. It was just a small wooden board, but it carried decades of pride and memory. In 2010, her career was coming to a close. The Navy held a farewell ceremony at Pearl Harbor in January, before sending her north to Puget Sound for inactivation. She made a final visit to her namesake city, then entered the careful process of shutting down a nuclear submarine, removing fuel, dismantling systems, recycling steel. She was officially decommissioned in February 2011, and the following year, she was gone, cut apart, and melted down. Her metal turned to civilian use. But the class she started is still out there. Submarines like San Juan, Helena, Charlotte, Key West, and many others still slip under the waves from Norfolk, San Diego, Pearl Harbor, and Guam. However, even a predator like the Los Angeles pales next to the submarine that carries America's ultimate insurance policy. Think of a steel ghost, half the length of the Empire State Building, sliding away from a pier and sinking beneath the waves until the ocean swallows her whole. No splash, no trace, just gone. That will be the USS District of Columbia, the first of America's new Columbia-class ballistic missile submarine. She was not built to chase headlines or duel with other ships. She was built to disappear, and in her silence resides the power to end civilization. That is the crucial point. As long as she exists, no rival will risk pressing the button first. It is the guarantee of deterrence. She is immense, about 170 meters long and 13.1 meters wide. Submerged, she displaces more than 20,000 tons, being larger than the Ohio class she is replacing. A steel ghost of this size does not come cheap. The lead ship is budgeted at around $18.1 billion, while subsequent submarines are expected to average about $11.4 billion each. When she finally sails, the Columbia will be the largest submarine the United States has ever built. However, she carries fewer missile tubes, 16 compared to the Ohio's 24. That sounds like a downgrade until you look closer. Every inch of her is optimized. Every tube is paired with electronics, sonar, and propulsion systems tuned from day one for absolute silence. The Columbia is not about carrying more. It is about carrying smarter and more undetectably. At her core is a nuclear engine built to outlast her. The S-1B reactor was designed to power the submarine for its entire 40-plus year service life, without ever needing to crack the hull open for a midlife refueling. The old Ohios had to come home after 20 years for a refueling that sidelined them for years. The power plant connects to something America has never used on a boomer before, an integrated electric drive. Instead of gears grinding from the reactor to the propeller shaft, the reactor generates steam. The steam spins turbines. The turbines feed electricity into a massive motor, and that motor silently turns the pump jet propulsor at the stern. Fewer moving parts, less noise, less chance of breaking. The ocean is full of sound, currents, storms, whales, but the Columbia was engineered so her signature disappears into that background noise. And then comes the missile farm. In the belly of the ship, there are 16 launch tubes, each the size of a small silo. They are built in modular blocks called quad pack, 4 tubes per block, bolted into the hull like puzzle pieces. It is not just an American tactic. Britain's new dreadnought submarines use the exact same system. For the first time in modern history, the US and the UK will share the same missile compartment architecture. Each tube holds a Trident II D5 missile, the workhorse of America's sea-based arsenal. Over the next decade, the fleet will move to an upgraded D5LE2 version, an overhaul that keeps the Trident relevant until the 2080s. New guidance, new electronics, hardened brain. The entire system is refreshed so that, as long as the Columbia sails, the missiles she carries will remain the most credible second strike weapon on Earth. That is the essence of deterrence. Knowing that even if someone lands a first punch, the answer that comes back will erase their map. Her armaments outside the missiles remain simple. She still carries 21-inch torpedo tubes for Mark 48 heavyweight torpedoes. They are not for picking fights. They are insurance. The Columbia's stealth does not stop with her reactor or her missile. Her sensors and control surfaces are built to enhance her invisibility. In the bow, there is a large aperture sonar, derived from the Virginia, but even larger, tuned for listening instead of broadcast. At the stern, she carries an X-shaped rudder system instead of the old cross. 4 fins canted in an X offer finer control when the boat creeps at low speed, perfect for silently sliding away from a coastline or trimming into depth before vanishing on patrol. This provides superior balance for a machine that weighs more than 900 million kilograms. Life inside is a relentless routine. About 155 sailors per crew, split into blue and gold teams. Thus, one crew trains while the other patrols. Inside, there are stacked bunks, mess decks that serve food 24 hours a day, a gym squeezed into a room the size of a storage closet, and constant drills. And here is the brutal truth. The District of Columbia does not even exist as a finished submarine yet. Her keel was laid in 2022. Right now, she is just a collection of giant steel sections under cranes at electric boat shipyards in Connecticut and Rhode Island. Commissioning is not expected until around 2030. Construction has faced hurdles, workforce shortages, supply chain tangle, the sheer difficulty of building a first-in-class nuclear machine. The Navy has admitted that the schedule has slipped by a year or more, but the stakes will not allow them to miss the finish line. The first Ohio begins to retire in 2027. By the early 2030s, the Columbia must be on patrol, or America risks a gap in its nuclear shield. This massive project is too much for a single shipyard. General Dynamics Electric Boat leads, but Huntington's Newport News Yard is an integral partner. Sections of the submarine are built in both locations and then joined like puzzle pieces in Connecticut. It is the same 2-yard dance that matured on the Virginia-class attack subs, but scaled up to a monster. The Columbia may be the giant of today, but the Navy is already drawing up something new, something faster, quieter, and even more lethal. Think of the ocean as a chessboard stretched across the entire planet. On that board, the most dangerous pieces are not in plain sight. They glide silently under thousands of feet of water, hidden, patient, waiting. The Navy's next great piece in this game has a name both plain and mysterious: SSN-X. In Navy language, SSN is the acronym for a nuclear-powered fast-attack submarine, the fleet's hunter-killers. The X is not a flourish. It literally means the design has not been finalized yet, but the intent is crystal clear. The SSN-X is not about incremental tweaks. It is about building the apex predator of the deep, the ship that can outrun, outfight, outsense, and outlast anything a rival navy can throw into the water. The Navy calls its requirement ocean superiority. That is a loaded phrase. It means this is not just about coastal stalking or sneaking around in the shallows, as we sometimes imagine. This is about blue water, the open ocean far from home, where the most serious adversaries operate. The brief is bold: faster through the water, quieter across the speed range, more payload embedded in the torpedo room, and the ability to quarterback whole swarms of unmanned undersea vehicles without even breaking a sweat. Simply put, the SSN-X has to be a step change, not a sidestep. The timeline underscores how big a bet this is. This is not a next summer kind of project. It is decades away. Originally, the Navy wanted the first procurement in the mid-2030s. Now, it has been officially pushed to fiscal year 2040, both to give the budget breathing room and to ensure the design is right before anyone cuts steel. In the meantime, the Virginias keep rolling off the line to carry the load, and the Columbia-class boomers occupy the top priority slot. But the SSN-X still soaks up serious money. The fiscal year 2026 request set aside more than $600 million in research and development just for this future submarine, divided between hull and systems studies on one side and next-generation nuclear propulsion on the other. This is the slow, expensive homework phase, the unglamorous work of running tank tests, crunching acoustic models, and trading volume against silence until the numbers align. Ask any sailor what they want in the next attack boat, and the answer is the speed and payload of the Seawolf, the stealth and sensors of the Virginia, the life of ship reactor availability of the Columbia. Put those three together, and you have the silhouette of the requirement. A boat that can sprint without screaming, stalk without being heard, hit harder with more weapons and more robots in the torpedo room, and stay at sea longer with fewer interruptions. This combination pushes displacement upward because quiet takes space. The more you isolate machinery, the more room you need. The bigger the sonar arrays, the more volume you consume. Analysts watching the trade studies expect the SSNX to be larger than the Virginia and perhaps even larger than the Seawolf, exceeding 10,000 tons submerged if the Navy's ambitions survive contact with reality. This will not just be another torpedo and tomahawk hauler. The real revolution is in what the Navy calls horizontal payload, the torpedo room. That is the flexible bay you reconfigure when the mission changes. In the SSNX, it will not just be racks of torpedoes and missiles. It will also be interfaces and cradle space for advanced unmanned undersea vehicles, UUVs, distributed sensors, long-range drones, and whatever else the job calls for. The vision is simple but radical. On one patrol, you are stacked with torpedoes and mines. On the next, you are babysitting a team of robotic scouts, launching and recovering them through your tubes, providing them with power and data, and then pulling their eyes and ears back into your combat system. The submarine becomes the central node of an underwater intelligence network. Leave a comment below telling us which of these technologies you think is most crucial for the future of naval warfare. The final push is what the Navy calls decision superiority. This means knowing what is happening faster and acting smarter than the adversary. Anyone who has ever sat in a control room will tell you that the hardest calls often hinge on faint, ambiguous contacts. A whisper of a line on the sonar waterfall. Is it a merchant ship hundreds of miles away? Or is it a rival attack sub close enough to ruin your day? The SSNX is being designed to process more raw information, fuse it cleanly, and present it in a way that allows humans to make better decisions under pressure. More sensors, better computing power, displays that truly provide clarity instead of clutter. Of course, ambition always collides with money. The Navy's own planning numbers estimate each SSNX at around $7.1 billion per unit. The Congressional Budget Office, more cautious, raises that to nearly $8.7 billion. Either way, we are talking about a ship that costs more than a Virginia with a payload module, but less than a Columbia-class boomer. It is tempting to imagine futuristic duels, hypersonics, lasers, but the real breakthroughs are quiet, literally, hull forms that cut through the water with fewer whispers at both low and high speed. Machinery isolation so refined, you can hear the difference just walking across a compartment. Power distribution that does not broadcast a signature to anyone listening. And combat systems whose software can be updated like a smartphone without having to tear apart steel. These are the boring, invisible forms of excellence that keep a submarine hidden when it needs to sprint across an ocean, or slide out of shallow water at periscope depth, or loiter for days in an area where the environment itself conspires to give it away. One debate persists in the background: nuclear fuel. Some advocate for low-enriched uranium reactors for non-proliferation optics. The Navy's answer is a firm no. The impact on performance, the redesign cost, the delays, none of it pays off militarily. The SSNX will stick with highly enriched fuel that lasts the life of the boat. The same philosophy driving the Columbia. The payoff is simple: freedom. Freedom from midlife refueling overhaul. Freedom to plan patrols without looming shipyard periods. freedom to maintain pressure on the far side of the world without pause. Adversaries are not standing still. Russia is still building advanced attack submarines. China has increased its underwater fleet at a pace that surprised planners a decade ago. Both are investing money in long-range sensors and anti-submarine weapons designed to shrink the ocean for American ships. The U.S. answer is not to build more hulls than they do, but to take a quantum leap in capability, to make the SSN FES so quiet, so versatile, and so effective that no rival commander would dare take the gamble. Thank you for watching. Now, check out the videos popping up on the screen for more incredible stories about technology and defense.